What a race, man. What a freaking race. Sir Lewis Hamilton now has most wins in Formula 1, which is 104, beating his own record, which was 103. And now his number of poles and number of race wins are balanced again. Who would have thought that Lewis Hamilton is going to win the Silverstone Grand Prix? Actually, I did because that's what I predicted and I almost got my predictions right. Why was I in a Mercedes t-shirt watching the race? Well, you need to follow me on Instagram to know that. But this race actually showed you why drivers like Max and Lewis are a cut above the rest. Let's talk about everything starting with the race start, and this was such a well orchestrated race start from Mercedes. I'm pretty sure they planned it because you can see Lewis Hamilton pointing his car slightly towards the left. Initially, I thought it was to attack Russell to gain the lead by turn 1, but that was not the plan. You can see as soon as the race starts, Hamilton quietly tucks behind Russell to protect him from Verstappen and Norris. Norris tried to make a move on the outside, but once again Hamilton had the best of him and Norris had to go a little bit off track. Verstappen took an advantage of it, and that was your 1, 2, 3, 4. And then everybody slowed down and everybody was maintaining a certain pace. Hamilton was not attacking Russell, but after some time you could see the McLarens once again catching up to Max Verstappen, and Lando went by, Oscar Piastri went by, and it almost seemed like Max had no pace and a podium was definitely out of contention. But there's a reason as to why this was happening. So Max didn't have the right amount of downforce that was needed on the front axle, and because of this, his tires were wearing quickly and he was losing out and he was not on the pace. That's why he was overtaken by both of the McLarens. But then later on, after some time, you see drops of rain falling, and this is where Lewis Hamilton lights up. He closes the gap to Russell. Russell is struggling, and in that moment you can see this move. The crowd is cheering and Lewis Hamilton is now leading the race. Russell is in P2, both McLarens are catching up, and after some time the McLarens have pace. They overtake Russell, they overtake Hamilton, and what was a Mercedes 1-2 is now a McLaren 1-2. Absolute cinema. This was so much fun to watch. Everybody trying to keep it on the track during the rain, and the lead is getting changed, people are overtaking, and there is actually a reason for this. So both of the Mercedes went with a low downforce setup in comparison to the Red Bull or the McLarens, and even between the two Mercedes, Russell had lower downforce than Lewis Hamilton. Now this helped him during qualifying. He was able to get that extra 2 tenths out. Lewis said that in the press conference after qualifying that he has set up his car for the race pace, but when he says that, people just blame it on him making an excuse because he's slower than Russell and so on, but actually he was right. He did have slightly more downforce than Russell, because of which he was able to preserve the tires, and when it gets damp, when there is rain, higher downforce helps. And that's why Russell was struggling a bit in comparison to Hamilton, and that's why the McLarens were much stronger than the Mercedes, because they had even higher downforce. And this was a very tricky part in the race where they said that rain is going to be there for 5-10 minutes, then it's going to be dry, and then it's going to rain again. So most of the people decided not to pit. Mercedes asked Lewis if he wants to pit for intermediate tires. He said no, and that was an amazing call. None of the drivers pitted except for Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc, and that was the biggest mistake Leclerc could make, because the thing is, with the intermediate tires, they need the circuit to be damp. If the circuit is dry, they overheat very quickly, and you will absolutely, in Silverstone especially, when there is such a long lap, you're going to kill the tires within 5 to 6 laps, and that's what happened with Leclerc, because that was his call. Ferrari asked him if he wanted to go for inters. He said yes. So Leclerc couldn't read the conditions properly. He went for the inters, and then the sun was out, things were dry, and that completely killed his pace. And once again, it was a disaster from his side of the garage. Same happened with Sergio Perez. And then came the second part where it started raining heavily, so everybody had to go on the intermediate tires, and here's where McLaren messed up, because the problem was Norris and Piastri were really close to each other on the track within 2 seconds. So if they were to pit both of the cars at once, Piastri would have easily lost 8 to 10 seconds, and that gap would have widened. So what they did was they asked Oscar to do one more lap on the slick tires in the wet conditions, but that actually was a much worse idea, because the gap grew even bigger, and that completely ruined Oscar's race, put him out of position, and then it was completely over for him. So that's first mistake that McLaren did. Mercedes did a double stack because there was enough gap between Hamilton and Russell, so they were fine. Perez was much behind, so Red Bull could comfortably pit Verstappen, and even on the intermediate tires that Red Bull was not really working that much, you could see that McLaren still, because of that higher downforce, had more pace. Norris could keep a gap to Hamilton, and In the meantime, George Russell had to retire from the race because of a water issue on the car. It must be very serious, because otherwise why would you let go of such a great race? And if they wouldn't have done it, it would have maybe hampered the engine or the transmission in the long run. So that's why they retired the car. And then this went on for a couple of laps, and then came another transition point where now it was quite dry and they had to shift to the slick tires once again, and Mercedes made the call at the right moment. Red Bull made the call at the same time. Hamilton, Verstappen both went into the pits. Verstappen went on a set of fresh hard tires. Lewis had an option of either soft or hard tires. They went with the soft because there were only 12 or 13 laps remaining. And here's where McLaren made another mistake, that they pitted Norris 1 lap late. But that was okay. They pitted Norris on the next lap. Norris, maybe because of the pressure or something like that, stopped a little bit ahead of his pit box. And because of that, there was a little bit of a delay in changing his tires. And here's where they made a mistake. They asked Norris what he wants to do, and they copied same as Hamilton, which was the soft tires, which they shouldn't have done. Because McLaren was the only team that had a fresh set of medium tires available. That's what they gave to Oscar Piastri. They asked Oscar what does he want, and Oscar was like medium tires. And they should have done the same to Norris. The problem with McLaren is that they ask their drivers a lot for the input, which is not a bad thing, but then they have more data on the pit wall. They have to make those decisions. They have to trust themselves and make the decisions for the drivers a lot of times. And here, medium tires was the right call. But they somehow chose the soft tire, and that was another mistake, because as you could see, Hamilton was fine on the soft tires, Norris wasn't, probably because he was in the dirty air of Hamilton. Max was pushing all the time, completely killed his soft tires in a couple of laps. Max had an easy overtake on him. And that was the end of Norris's race. And you can see why that call was so wrong for Lando Norris, because Piastri went on medium tires and he reduced his gap to Norris by such a big margin. There was a big difference in their race pace. So that was clearly the team's fault. Also, here's where I feel the experience also comes in. Lewis was able to manage his soft tires much better in comparison to Norris. So yeah, a lot of things at play here. And at the same time, Verstappen was absolutely hammering those lap times on hard tires. And if the race was 2 to 3 laps longer, he would have probably gotten Lewis Hamilton as well. That was an amazing drive from Verstappen, because when he pitted for the second time or first time, I'm not sure, Red Bull did fix that front wing downforce thing that I mentioned earlier. So because of that, his car was on pace when they were on the hard tires. And the strategy was executed so well by Red Bull, and Max also drove so well. And because of that, he could get a P2, whereas initially it felt like he was nowhere in the race. And that's why I said this is when you realize why drivers like Lewis and Max are a class apart, because be it mixed conditions, driving on slick tires in wet conditions, taking their calls for the tires, when to pit, when not to pit, and maintaining that gap, maintaining that pace. They are just on another level, and that win for Lewis Hamilton felt so special. It's been like 945 days since his last win. It was in Saudi Arabia 2021. A lot has happened since then, and to have this win on the home ground must have been so special. It was a perfect drive from him, no mistakes, took all the calls right, and that was just amazing to watch as an F1 fan. I'm really happy for Haas as well, because they got into points once again with Nico Hülkenberg, P6. Last race they were P6 and P8. This race actually Hülkenberg had a couple of upgrades. They worked really well. Magnussen did not have them. He's going to have it next race, but really happy for Haas. The trajectory that they've taken this year has been very good, but I can't say the same about Ferrari, because the upgrade that they brought in Spain has not worked. I mean, that has put them on a back foot, and for this race especially, they reverted both of the cars to the pre-Spain specification. And at this point, it's quite sad, because after Monaco, Ferrari, it felt like Ferrari is gonna be right there. They are gonna be winning races. They're gonna be closing that gap to Red Bull, but they're clearly nowhere, and that one upgrade has completely screwed things out. Yuki Tsunoda also got into points, and talking about the Red Bull family, a lot of shakeup has been happening. I mean, as you guys know, Sergio Perez is not doing well. He binned his car in quali, started the race way down, and apparently there is a performance clause in his contract that if he does not achieve certain targets, he could be kicked out from that Red Bull seat. And the problem is that the only option that Red Bull is considering to replace him with is Daniel Ricciardo. I don't know why they're not putting Yuki in that Red Bull. They're not even considering him for the Red Bull seat. That is just weird, because Yuki has been so good. But around the summer break or after the summer break, if Perez does not pick up his performance, you can see some driver market changes in the Red Bull family. But what started as a boring season, we thought it's going to be another 2023 or even worse, has changed so much. We are just halfway into the season. It's been 12 races, and we've got 6 different race winners. Last year we only had 3, so this year has been amazing. I can't wait for the next couple of races. Mercedes is gonna be bringing upgrades to every race until the summer break, so they have parts coming in Hungary, they have parts coming in Spa, and I'm not really sure if Mercedes now has fixed all of their problems, because the thing is, this could also be a recency bias. Lately, all of the races have been in somewhat colder temperatures where their car does really well. So whether they fixed all of the problems or not, we'll see that in the upcoming races. And the most weird team for me right now is Aston Martin, because none of their upgrades have worked. And at the British Grand Prix, you saw Stroll out-qualify Alonso by around 3 tenths, and he also finished ahead of Alonso. So that is something I will not understand. Why is that happening? What's wrong? And that team has another big upgrade package coming in Hungary, and that's going to decide their future trajectory. Have they fixed the problems, or they're going to be even worse? So yeah, I'm excited for the next race. Hungary once again is a very strong track for Lewis Hamilton. And Mercedes has gotten poles there since the last 2 years when their car was not that great. So this could be another unexpected weekend. Thankfully now we have 1 week break, and after that we have 2 races back to back before the summer break. So I'm really excited for all of the races now. What were your thoughts about the British Grand Prix? Let me know in the comments. If there are any more questions about it, let me know. I'll try to answer them. You can follow my Instagram page or F1 Guy for more updates. A lot of content is being pushed out there, and let me know what more would you like to see on the YouTube channel with race reviews or something like that. Like this video if you liked it, press the dislike button twice if you didn't like it. I'll catch up with you guys after the Hungarian Grand Prix.